Good evening. Thank you so much for coming tonight to the Primary Care Coalition's first ever storytelling show. Thank you so much. My name is Elizabeth Arend. I am your host for the evening. I am the Director of Provider Services at the Primary Care Coalition. I'm pretty new to the organization. I came about 1.5 years ago, and it was quite a long journey to get there. But I remember how it all started. I remember the exact moment that I got hooked on public health. I was studying women's health on a fellowship after college, and when I was living in Cairo, I met the founder of the Breast Cancer Foundation of Egypt. Now, this was 2003, so breast cancer was a pretty taboo topic, and the founder was explaining to me how her organization helped rural women access mammograms. Basically, they had a mobile mammography van, and they went door to door. They talked to the man of the household, and tried to convince him that letting his wife get a mammogram would help extend the life of his property. Now, this was pretty shocking for me coming from the United States, but I was also fascinated. I was fascinated by this idea that in order to get to a particular health outcome in a particular culture, you might have to do a little bit of translation. I studied this phenomenon around the world for a year, in Ireland, South Africa, Egypt, and then the Netherlands, before my family guilt-tripped me into coming back home. But I knew I wanted to go back. I knew I wanted to go back abroad and work in public health. I couldn't think of anything more challenging and more interesting than working in public health across cultures. My first job was in hospital management in eastern Ethiopia. From there, I moved to South Africa, where I worked with adolescents in a community with high HIV prevalence. And from there, I moved to eastern Rwanda, where I worked in a hospital in program monitoring and evaluation. I always felt like I gained so much more from each experience than I could ever possibly give. But it was exciting. I was having a ball. I was learning a ton. And I looked up to the public health leaders around me, people from the Centers for Disease Control and the State Department and the World Health Organization. And I really wanted to walk in their footsteps one day. I admit I also wanted to make my family proud, but mostly I made them worry. When I moved to Ethiopia, my mom was convinced I was going to be kidnapped by Somali pirates. It didn't really matter that I was not in Somalia, and Ethiopia's landlocked. There aren't that many pirates walking around, but she was convinced the Somali pirates were coming for me. Then she watched a nature documentary and learned about the black mamba snakes. So every email and phone call after that had to end with, "Look out for the black mambas." You know, like I'd have a momentary lapse of judgment if I ran into a snake and I would like try to hug it or something. So I'm pretty sure they didn't sleep much at night when I was living abroad, but slowly, over time, things changed. Eventually, I heard my dad would refer to me among his friends as his Africa daughter. And I kept that title even when I moved to Washington, D.C., because I still worked in international development. I was traveling to Africa all the time: Uganda, Cameroon, Kenya, Mozambique, South Africa, Lesotho, Tanzania. In fact, I'd probably be somewhere in Africa right now if it weren't for my health insurance company. My health insurance company broke the spell. You see, when I was living abroad and developing my career, I also developed a mental illness. I became severely, severely depressed when I was living in South Africa, and I downward spiraled to the point where I wanted to die. I finally admitted that I needed help, and I got that help. I found a psychiatrist, I got on medication, and I started to recover. Fast forward several years later, I'm in DC. My psychiatrist says, "You're good to go, you can start tapering off your meds, you're in good shape." And so I did. But over the next 1.5 years, the depression slowly crept back. And when I realized what was happening, I knew I was going back to that sunken place. And I was terrified. I needed to find a psychiatrist, and fast, one who was in my network, one who was accessible by public transport because I didn't own a car, and one that was accepting new patients. Now, I'm sure many people in this audience know psychiatrists are an endangered species. So all of these additional criteria weren't exactly helpful. It took 14 phone calls as I was curled up in a ball on the floor of my kitchen to finally get through and find a psychiatrist. He was a nice enough guy, but he was like 104 years old, and I kept thinking, how long do I have before he keels over and I have to go shopping for a psychiatrist all over again? At the time I was trying to get back into treatment, my husband and I had a lot of unexpected medical bills. In the month of September alone, we had to pay $855 out of pocket. And that was money I knew we were never getting back. That was not getting reimbursed. The only good thing about that $855 is that I knew that meant we met our deductible. So we would at least get some reimbursement for the rest of the calendar year. That's what I thought until I spoke to an agent at my health insurance company on a call that I sincerely hope was recorded for quality assurance. The agent told me that my deductible period wasn't in fact a calendar year like I had been told when I first signed up for the insurance plan. No, it was tied to my company's fiscal year, which began on October 1st. This is September 28th. I've got $855 of unreimbursable medical expenses on my credit card. And I'm being told, just as I thought I was going to get something, anything, reimbursed for all of the medical expenses that I knew were to come, the clock was going back to zero a few days later. So I was calm, I took a deep breath, and I lost it. I lost it. I just kept saying, no, 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 my deductible period is a calendar year, over and over and over again. And the customer service representative said, I'm sorry, ma'am, there's nothing I can do, over and over and over again. And pretty soon I am rage crying. And the agent gets her supervisor, the supervisor gets her supervisor, and finally, they agree that yes, we have this document here. It says that your deductible period is a calendar year, but we have another document that says it's a fiscal year. It took a few more rounds of battle, but we finally came to the conclusion that my deductible period could stay a calendar year, and my husband and I could submit claims for reimbursement through December 31st. And I started to breathe again. And yet, this whole exchange was not exactly comforting. The whole time I was on the phone, and afterwards I just kept thinking, I have every imaginable advantage. I have commercial health insurance. I live in a major metropolitan area. I'm a native English speaker. I am educated. I was born in New Jersey. I mean, come on. And just, what about everybody else? What about people who don't have all of these advantages? How do they get care? How do they navigate this so-called healthcare system? And that was it. I knew I couldn't work in health system strengthening in sub-Saharan Africa on behalf of the US government anymore, when we didn't even have a functional healthcare system of our own. I joined PCC in 2017, and I am so proud to work with our 10 clinic organizations in the Montgomery Cares program. They served over 25,000 low-income uninsured patients every single day. Our extraordinary network of specialists who serve 1,700 of those patients every year. I'm just so honored and privileged to be a part of this community. You're going to hear some stories from some of the people who make health happen in Montgomery County and beyond every day tonight. And even though I'm not jetting off and spending my weekends with giraffes and elephants anymore, and my transatlantic flights have been replaced by 45 minutes on the red line every morning, I wouldn't change it for the world. I saw the sign.